Hi, Cori. Welcome back. We've done a couple of these videos now, and it's always fun to chat with you about collaborative piano and specifically choral accompanying. And so today we are going to talk about another work that is very popular in the choral world, and that is Vivaldi's Gloria. I almost said Rutter's Gloria. That's another one that we should do, but we are going way much further back to Vivaldi. And I guess Vivaldi wrote more than one Gloria, but the one that is typically done is the D major, and it's actually part of a bigger work with multiple movements, but we're just going to talk specifically about the Gloria movement, the Gloria in Excelsis movement today. So this is the first movement of the 12 movement work, and I'm going to share my screen here so that we can just dive into the music. Here we go. First of all, it has this long piano introduction. Would you like to talk a little bit about how you approach this intro?
Yeah, I'm comparing it with my score. It looks like you have edited by Westerman. Mine is edited by Martins. But they look pretty similar.
Yes, I think most of the additions are pretty similar for this one, as far as I know. And I just got this one off of IMSLP, I think, or somewhere online for free. So it's possible it has some errors, but it looks like what I'm used to seeing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fun piece. Everybody knows Vivaldi's seasons, right? The four seasons. So it reminds me of that a little
Mhm.
bit, as far as the texture and what the orchestra is doing. I think the double thirds are the most intimidating for a pianist.
Yes. So what do you do with the thirds, Corey?
Yeah, I think that I just play the first one, honestly. Uh,
Hmm.
the D and the F sharp in that second half of the first beat. And then the rest, I just play the tops. I mean, if I'm feeling ambitious, maybe I try a little. I played the Beethoven sonata that starts with double thirds, and I studied it in college, and it took me at least a year to master it. And then I still felt like it wasn't great. And I've since picked it up, and it's gotten better. But if you don't need to play them, why kill yourself?
Right. And if you throw in a couple here and there, like you were saying, like especially on, stronger beats or the first one, it kind of tricks your ear into thinking that they're all there because it's going so quickly. Um, I would encourage pianists to play it really slowly with the thirds so you can hear how it sounds. You also maybe play it without any of the thirds to hear how that sounds, and then add in a couple that feel comfortable and that you can put in without losing any of your tempo.
Yeah, that's a great idea because you can add in like on the third beat, you can do that first third and maybe the second half of that beat, just the D and the F sharp again, and then just take the G.
Mhm. Yeah, and in measure 4 and 6, an option would be to bring your left hand up and do the thirds with your left hand, but then you got to get back down pretty quickly, so you're probably going to end up leaving a couple of the last ones out. So I don't think I would do that, but it is an option if you're feeling ambitious and you really want to get more of the thirds in there. You could split it between your hands.
Yeah, I think when you get to measure 8 and 9 and so on, I love that part actually because you can use a wrist movement to just wrist rotation, you can get all of those notes real well. So in measure 8, I would play the D in the right hand and then the D in the F sharp third. And then I
Mhm.
would take the top 16th notes for the second beat so that I'm in a place where I can just really quickly shift and do the wrist rotation on beat 2 and then just go down through 15.
Yeah. Do you by any chance know what fingering you use, like for the A G? Like, do you use a 4/3 or do you s to set yourself up for the B? Do you know?
Just thinking about it now, it would make sense to take the first third on the second half of the first beat.
Okay, so right in
So,
here.
so there I would probably take that first third with a 1, 2, and then go up. My third finger takes the top G, and
Hmm.
then my fourth and third take the A G, and then
Hmm.
I'm right in place for a 5-2 on beat 3.
Yeah, I think that's what I do as well. So, Corey, we have these numbers under the bass. Do you want to
I
talk?
mean, it's figured bass, right? So this is
Yeah.
how a lot of Baroque music was notated, and you improvise and do your own sort of chord structure above it. I mean, in a reduction in this situation, I wouldn't do anything with it. I would just play the octaves as written.
Yeah, so just being aware of that that's why it's there, but I think in this case you can ignore it. Um, Occasionally you might see a piece that only has the bass line and those numbers, and then you have to figure out the figured bass above it. I don't think most accompanists aren't asked to do that. Typically, you're given what's called a realization, where it's written out for you according to those figures. So, people who know much more about figured bass than I do have done the realization and written out the notes for you, so you don't have to figure that out on your own. Let's talk about where the choir comes in at measure 17. First of all, this entrance to me feels a little bit awkward because it's in the middle of the measure. And when we were talking a little bit prior to doing this video, I said that, and you said, I think your response was, that's the conductor's job to bring the choir in, which is absolutely true. um, but it just kind of like sometimes throws me just a tiny bit, especially the score I was using recently for this. I had a page turn after the end of that first page, and I had to turn the page and then just be aware that 6 beats and then the choir comes in there.
So that's a really good point as far as scores go. I mean, you're not always in charge of where the measures and the page turns are, right? So sometimes I'll copy a photocopy like that last measure of the first page, and then I'll cut it out and I'll glue it to the top of the next page. Um, Not glue, I'll probably tape it
Yeah.
or something like that so that my page turn is easier and then I'm not having to guess.
Yes. I want to do a video, a whole video on like page turns and how to make your music work, but I haven't done it yet. It's on my list. But another option for this, which I should have done, is just photocopy the first page and then open it so I would have the first 3 pages there. But
Right.
I don't know. I guess I didn't do that for whatever reason. So I would just turn the page early. And it's not, that measure isn't that hard to memorize. Okay, so the choir comes in full and forte. I don't know. Should we talk about the open score?
Yeah, I mean, I would write in the big beats 1, 2 on measure 17 because my brain leaves me sometimes and I switch to open score and there's a rest there and I might come in on beat 2. So I would make it a lot easier on myself and write
Yeah, that's a
a
good
on the
point.
Gloria.
Yes. And there is a place, I'm pretty sure later in the music where the Gloria rhythm is different, where it's the Gloria. And so you want to make sure that you're on top of the rhythm, right? Gloria, Gloria. And that you are counting these rests properly if you're playing the open score. We've talked about before too with open score writing in the chords. Obviously, this first chord is just D major, and then you go to A major. So maybe writing those in just to help your brain a little is good. Well, then we have this in excelsis Deo part and then an echo of that. So again, just getting comfortable with the chords, but this Baroque music is nothing crazy. It's just your normal D major chords in the key of D major. We do get some accidentals here coming up, though. If you look at page 7 here in measure 31, you want to make sure that you're ready for those G sharps and A sharps going into this little, I guess, modulation here.
Yeah, and the elongated rhythm that you were talking about is in measure 28. So that's definitely something I would mark.
So this is all kind of elongated, and then that 28 is the Gloria. So make sure that you are a good leader to your choir in that spot. And then the same thing happens at the bottom of this page 7 here, measure 38, I think it is. Gloria, Gloria. And then we actually have another rhythm over here at 50, Gloria in X. So just being aware, you're going to prep this ahead of time and you're going to be aware of all those different rhythms. We didn't talk about listening to this one, but it's always helpful to listen ahead of time too. And I like to listen with pencil in hand and looking at the score. So if I hear something that I'm like, oh, I wasn't expecting that rhythm to be different, I can mark it and then I'm ready to go.
Oh, well, I was going to say another place I would mark is the end of, let's see, measure 43, 44. You're coming out of a long held phrase and you might anticipate all these tied notes, but wherever you have, like in the tenor, it's going to move. So I would circle measure 44 where their tenor moves. Uh,
Yes.
it's really easy to get comfortable and just hold, and then the tenors try to move and you're not there with them.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so if you look up here at measure 41, you have your chord, and then the altos have a little moving part there in 42, and then the tenors are the only ones who move at 44. So, and then if you keep going, the tenors move again at 47.
Yeah, and then you have in the reduction again these thirds that you can just take, the top of the 16ths or play around with adding a third in here and there, but definitely don't need to play all of them.
And on some of these longer chords, as the accompanist, you might want to add in like some bass or something so that the choir can feel the rhythm if you're just playing the open score. And it kind of depends on the conductor what he wants, but that can be helpful for them to hear that dun 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 underneath, even though you're playing their parts, it will keep them all together because some of them, as we know, aren't the most steady counters. Not to throw any choir members under the bus, but
Another thing I was going to mention, as you listen, you'll hear that there's the slightest emphasis on the first beat of every measure.
mm,
Not a tenuto, but almost. So you might want to play around with that. It's just an extra, it's a very Baroque sounding element to it.
it is. And speaking of that, let's talk a little bit about this style. Even though the choir comes in big and they have these big, like full chords, the accompaniment is pretty light. Like, yes, there are times when you're forte, but it has to have kind of that dun 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 dun, like that light, almost plucky string kind of sound. You never want it to sound romantic or heavy in any way. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. And I would not use a lot of pedal. Maybe you'd use pedal for that first eighth each time. Maybe into the second eighth, but you don't need more than that. It is very yeah, it's just a lighter texture.
Yeah, I would, if I were working on this, I would experiment with no pedal and see, and then maybe just add in a little bit. But I think start with no pedal and then just add in a touch as needed, perhaps.
Measure 62, you have your first uh, echo. It's not very hard. This is actually probably an easy entry choral piece as far as reading open score.
Yeah, I agree.
But I would mark the entrances of the alto and bass so you know that they're coming and they're different.
Yeah, I was actually thinking in my accompanying course, I should put this one in the open score section because it's a good one where you can mark chords. It's a good one for talking about orchestral reductions and leaving things out. And there's just a little bit of contrapuntal stuff, but nothing too crazy. So I
So
think
can
I
we
need
go
to.
back real quick? Go back to
Yes.
that part. So we talk about marking vocal entrances. How do you do that?
I usually just put like a little bracket, but you could do, I mean, you could do different things. If it's something that I really am having a hard time with missing every time or something, I might do an arrow, but I usually just do a bracket. What do you do?
I do arrows, and I don't know when I started or why, but an arrow, I think because I used to circle, and to me, a circle is an error.
Mm.
And so I
Mhm.
circle errors or spots that are tricky that I really need to pay attention to, but I do arrows for entrances.
Yeah, you kind of just have to come up with your own shorthand that works for you. So that kind of brings us almost to the end here. There's a big fermata, so make sure you're watching very carefully there. And then the choir has this 2-bar little ending thing, and you're going to keep deedle until you get to the that's the uh, official term for it, deedle till you get to the end here, and then dun 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 dun. And I like to think of myself as a string section here, because it's a different sound. I mean, we talked about the light sound, but there's like, I like to do it with just a little bit of separation, right? Dun, 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 dun. Just that Baroque light string separated feel. How about you?
Yeah, I agree. And another thing with the accompaniment in like 69, 70, the end of 69, I would play the last beat. Let's see, how would I say this? The third on the fourth beat I would
Mhm.
play, but not the next third. So I can do a nice sort of little wrist rotation, or I mean, it's really kind of fingery there. And then same thing with measure 70. I would just take the first, fourth, and then the first third of the second beat, um, just as a way to simplify it.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. And then you're just gonna have to watch your conductor at the end. I think some probably do a retard on those last chords and some don't. I think
Well,
just,
and it probably depends on if they're going into the next piece or not. They're,
yeah, I think that's true.
they won't want a big retard if they're just moving on to the rest of the piece.
Hmm.
Another thing I wanted to mention is in the pages before this, another way you can help the choir is by breathing with them. I don't
Hmm.
know if there's a good, maybe before this, but I try to mark the breaths that the conductor puts in. And so that I'm actually lifting off. Yeah, so like on page 7, there probably will be a breath somewhere in there. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, this whole section from like 28 to 35, marking the breaths, and especially when you're doing the open score with them,
Mhm.
lifting a little when they're breathing. I agree. Mark the breaths that the conductor gives.
Yeah, I think it's you can make yourself more valuable as a pianist by following all the markings that the conductor is doing, putting them all into your score and working just as hard as he is or she is and as the choir is. It just makes you more helpful, like you said, with leading a sectional or even just leading from the piano during rehearsal.
Yeah.
Because all those different nuances, the choir will catch them. The conductor may not know exactly what you're doing, but it'll sound really good. And the choir will get it and they'll thank you. And it's just a win-win all the way around.
Yes, that is such a good point. I had a conductor who really expected me to play musically from the very first time we looked at a piece because he said the choir is going to do what you do. So if you're doing the phrasing and you're doing the dynamics, even though this is the first time they've seen the piece and they're just trying to sing the right notes and, some of the right rhythms, if I was doing it playing musically from that very first rehearsal, it really moved them ahead faster.
I think maybe we should be called silent conductors. Maybe we need to elevate our title from collaborative pianist. I mean,
Yeah,
that's really what you're doing. And you can be a complement to the conductor or an antagonist. And
it's
it's
true.
much better for everybody if you can work together and support what he's or she is doing with their words and their conducting movements. You do that from the piano.
Well, do you have any closing thoughts on Vivaldi's Gloria?
I think it's a wonderful piece. It's really fun, and don't get intimidated by the thirds. Just make them work for you.
Yes, I think keeping the style, focusing on that light, airy style, the string, sound is gonna elevate this piece. Yeah, I'm excited for people to try it because it's an amazing piece, another one of the standards in the choral repertoire. So thank you, Cori, for being here. It's always good to catch up and talk choral music with you. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.